Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen. I am your co host Joshua for Business Story of the Week. And you know how it is. Today, we uncover stories of perseverance, entrepreneurship, business, where we invite the experts, the biggest leaders and the minds in their field, and to talk to us about their successes, to talk to us about their perseverance, and give you that next bit of motivation in your journey. And today, we have ourselves a seasoned expert in organizational change. Alan O'Neill is the expert, the agent of change, the change agent, so to speak, when it comes to culture and strategy. His years of experience, with 30 years of experience across a wide range of industries, known for his practical, empathetic, and commercial approach, Alan excels in guiding teams through a transformative process to enhance customer experience and drive growth. His dynamic style, coupled with real life business models and success stories, motivates organizations to embrace change. With a rich background spanning blue chips to SMEs in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Alan's expertise is unparalleled in reigniting companies' passion for progress. And that is what we are going to dig into today. We are going to reignite your passion for progress today with the help of Alan. Alan, welcome to the show. How are you doing? Thank you for being with us.
Joshua, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here. But I want to say before we go any further, when you say 30 plus years, I don't want your leaders, your listeners to be fooled by the grey hair. I'm only 37 years of age. So how I got 30 years experience? There you go. That's my secret.
Let's go. Now we need to uncover that secret. You need to tell us this today, Alan. Alan, so before I really get into the nitty gritty of this, I always like to start at the beginning. I always like to start where the journey began. In fact, I always like to ask the questions like anything that happened in your childhood, perhaps that stands out in your memories or throughout your life, where it was a pivotal moment that you experienced that led you to specialize in facilitating organization change, to becoming the change agent today. What is the story of Alan O'Neill?
Well, this could take a long time, but I'll give you the short version, Joshua.
Please,
So
please.
I'm Irish. I live in Dublin, between Dublin and Dubai, actually.
Mhm,
I'm a dad of two plus three grandchildren, and I love
mhm,
kids dearly. And keep that in
mhm,
mind when I tell you my story, because I left school and for various studies, I went into the world of retail. So I was a
right.
retailer, a frontline retailer for
Mhm.
14 years.
Wow.
And I went from working for a retailer then to owning my own chain of stores here in Dublin, in
Mhm,
the jewelry business, actually. But I found myself working crazy hours, Joshua, and
right.
because I'm such a hands-on dad, I felt I wasn't spending enough time at home because
Mhm,
just retail is 7-day week. So
right.
I sold up with no plan as to what am I going to do next. But
Right.
over time, I literally stumbled into the training industry, the business training
Mhm,
industry, an industry I
mhm,
knew zero about prior to that.
mhm,
After a while with this organization, I found a niche that I knew I loved people. I knew I loved
right.
sharing and giving support and advice to people.
Uh-huh.
And training allows you to do that in a structured, formal way.
Yes.
But
Mhm,
then after a number of years of doing that and getting good at it and just enjoying it so much, I also became a bit cynical because it
right.
coincided with my return to college. I did an MBA and it changed my
Mhm,
thinking completely. Because
mhm,
before the MBA, I always looked at training as the end in itself. So we were working with
mhm,
lots of clients, doing great training on all the various programs you can imagine, like
Right.
leadership and selling and customer, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I might go back to a client 6 months after doing a program to check in and see,
Right.
well, how are things progressing? And far
Mm-hmm.
too often, Joshua, we were told, well, nothing really has changed. And
Right.
it made me realize that training, unless training is delivered in context of a
Right.
change program, there's no
Mm-hmm.
point in spending money. It's just a waste of money.
Right.
So
Right.
that experience, live experience, along with my new learning around bigger
Mm-hmm.
picture MBA stuff,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I changed completely. I sold up my
Right.
shares in my training company and I set up my current company called Cara, Kara.ie.
Mm-hmm.
I set that up 30 years ago almost.
Wow.
And still here, still doing what we do, working with organizations, supporting them. And of course, in that time, we've been incredibly privileged to work with some of the greatest brands on
Wow.
the world stage. But at the same time, I'm constantly learning. I'm
Mm-hmm.
all the time evolving myself. After all, if I'm in the world of change management and I'm trying to help others to change, well, I
Of
better
course.
be prepared to change myself. So I'm
Precisely.
constantly, yeah, constantly evolving, writing, consulting, and speaking around the
Mm-hmm.
world. So that's my
Mm-hmm.
short version of a very
Mm-hmm.
long grey hair story, Joshua.
That's a fantastic way to thank you for giving us the gist of it. Thank you for giving us the short version, the concise version of a long story change, right? Because I like how you said that training is one thing, but if you don't really practice the idea of that you need to change and improve in these contexts, then it feels meaningless, so to speak. And uh, applying those kinds of organizational changes and practice that you are now leading makes it feels like you must feel more meaningful, right? Um, I I watched your
Absolutely.
video. Go ahead.
Well, sorry, just before you continue, you're right, because when I think about our role in this world as change management consultants,
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
early days as a trainer, we were measured by the quality of the training. So did we
Yes,
do
yes.
good training programs? And we got these feedback sheets at the end and all
Hmm.
these glowing praises that you could wallpaper your walls with. But you know something? It's useless. All of that is useless
Yes.
unless it's making an impact and adding value to the
Right.
organizational effectiveness. So that's where we're
Mhm.
at now. I mean, how we measure ourselves now in my
Yes.
team is, did we add value to the client? Are
Yes.
they in a better place as a result of our work? And
Hmm.
especially, are they using the disciplines that we've shared with them in our
Yes.
encounters?
Yes, and that's. I wanted to also highlight that when you said that it all really begins with us, right? We need to practice what we preach, walk the talk, have that change start within us before we can start facilitating just change in individuals and organizations at large as well. It really brings me back to I watched your video with Wicklow Brewery, and you were
Ah,
teaching
right.
them about you taught them a lot of things, or like there were a lot of points you touched up on their self-sufficiency, business plans, their USP, improving their customer experience. But among the other videos that I also watched with you is you always mentioned that values is the key for driving change, and those values do start with yourself. Could you tell us a bit more about that and how that kind of build your organizational change practice around Kara?
Okay. So there's two parts of this. One part is to do with the 7 steps to profit, which I'll come back to.
Yes.
But
Hmm.
let me answer your question on values. So we specialize in helping organizations to refresh their culture.
Yes.
And because after all, culture is like the golden thread that weaves its way throughout every organization. It touches everything. And
Hmm.
I kind of make it sound like it's this software. In my pocket, I've got an incredibly powerful iPhone, which is a very powerful device, 100
Hmm.
whatever, 32 gigabyte of memory and touchscreen and blah, blah, blah. It's a very, very powerful piece of hardware, but it's useless without the
Yes.
software that powers it.
Yes. Hmm.
I believe culture is the same, that culture is the software that drives
Wow.
the hardware. And this is
Wow.
the message in my second book called Culture
Mhm.
Matters. Now, I know you want
Yes.
to come to the other book in a moment, but
Hmm.
taking culture, how does an organization shape its own culture? Because after all, every company has a culture, but not
Yes.
every company can define and clearly articulate what that culture is.
What that
And that's
culture
where they're missing a
is.
trick. But to me, the answer is with the set of values. Why?
Right.
Joshua, you and I, we live our own personal lives by a set of values that include
Hmm.
words like respect, integrity, honesty,
Hmm.
benevolence, etc.
Hmm.
So just let's
Hmm.
take respect as one example.
Hmm.
Joshua, I want you to imagine that you and I are going home this evening on a train together. We jump
Right.
on the train at the first stop. We get a seat. We're lucky to get a seat. And we're reading our phones or chatting away, and the train takes off, moves along on its journey, and at every stop, more people get on the train, and eventually there are no seats left. So picture that. You and I are
Right.
sitting, but there's no empty seats. And
Hmm.
then the train moves on and stops at the next stop. And
Yes. Hmm.
a pregnant woman or an elderly gentleman get on board. Now, what
Hmm.
do you do instinctively? Josh, you better get this right now.
Well, I need to let the pregnant woman sit to be more
Of course you
comfortable.
do. Of course you
Hmm.
do. And that's a behavior. You offering up your seat is a behavior, which is a
Yes.
direct response to this thing called respect, which you have in here. And where did that
Wow.
come from? It's in your core. You are taught
Yes.
that by your parents, by the
Hmm.
society around you. You know
Hmm.
that whenever you find yourself in a situation that demands respect, you respond, in other words, behave accordingly. Now, take that little mini lesson and multiply that into the organizational context, where
Wow.
organizations want to develop and want to see certain behaviors exhibited and lived every day. Maybe innovation, it could be
Hmm.
customer centricity, or it could be accountability. How can
Yes.
an organization possibly list every single behavioral scenario that they want their
Wow.
people to live like? They can't. So what do?
Hmm.
You group them under a set of values. And that's
Wow.
why I believe values are the framework in which the organizations can shape their culture. But too many get this wrong. Too many companies just go to Google and they Google values and they take their
Yes.
pick from a list. Oh, there's
Hmm.
customer. Yeah, we
Hmm.
have to have that. Teamwork. Oh, we have to have that.
Yes.
Ethics. Oh, we have to have that. They
Uh-huh.
end up with a list of values that nobody really believes in and nobody can even repeat.
Precisely.
My belief here is that this needs to be tailored for each organization in a very structured way. You need to work out
Hmm.
which values are needed in your organization to help you
Hmm.
deliver on your ambitions. It's a bit like
Wow.
if you've got a child that has maybe recently forgotten its manners.
Hmm.
Well, what do you do as a parent? You call out that child. You say, now
Hmm.
say please, say thank you. And you keep doing that
Hmm.
for a few days until the child
Hmm.
reforms the habit of having good manners. Now, again,
Yes.
I'm going to say, multiply that into the organizational context, where you're
Right.
trying to call out certain behaviors that you want. Well, that's how you do that by calling out the five, no more than five values that you believe are the ones that will help your organization shape itself and deliver on your ambition. That's the answer to the question on why values.
Yes. Alan, thank you for such a deep dive into that because, like you said, how many times have we seen organizations and company just pick words, maybe frame it, print it up there, or just put all these words
Yeah,
up there, and no one really knows what they mean, right? It's just like another poster in the lunchroom for everyone to see and for everyone to forget. But
a waste of
it,
time.
it, even the line, of course, this is not even when you say the value is the key for driving change to people, it's just like, yeah, of course it is, right? It's so agreeable that everyone won't even, but diving
Ah,
deep in the way that you did, that you put people together, you group them into values, and you find out what it is that they really, that they really start with in their core. And I think that's
sure.
very important. And I love that you're bringing that from a real life perspective into organizational change because I feel that is what's missing today. Alan, you mentioned your 7 steps along with the values. You mentioned 7 steps of profit, which is a process, that has been used by what, like Toyota, Getty, right? And the big companies that you've had work with, fantastic, extensive experience. And why has this become effective? What is the 7 steps process? And it says here, excellence in customer experience is the next great battleground. I remember that in one of your videos. Um, but tell us what is the 7 steps process, and why has it become so effective for large corporations and companies?
Okay, so if you stand back and, as I've done for 30 years, working with the great and the good, but also constantly researching, because I do a lot of writing, not just books,
Mhm,
but I do a lot of writing of articles. And as a
mhm.
speaker on the circuit, I've got to keep really relevant and fresh with my thinking.
Right.
Over the years, watching the best organizations, what is it that they're doing that makes them so successful? And
Mhm.
indeed, the converse, for those organizations that failed, why did they fail? And
Right.
when you stand back from both sets of questions, there's a common denominator. And the
Mhm.
common denominator is the 7 steps to profit. And they go like this. And by the way,
Mhm.
I'm going to call them out to you as if they are common sense. There isn't a single listener on this program that would disagree with the 7 steps. But
Wow.
they're going to say, well, what's so special about these? Well, I'll tell you what's
Mhm.
special about them. What's special about them is that while they are common sense, they're not
Mhm.
always common practice. And this is where
Right.
you see organizations falling down on some or many of the steps. So, step one,
Mhm. Mhm.
the starting point. I frame this as a pyramid. The bottom level at the very base is North Star, having a clearly
Right.
defined North Star. Now, let me be
Mhm.
simplistic. If you and I owned a hotel, we
Mhm.
would want to be sure what kind of hotel. Is it a 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, or 5 star hotel?
Mhm.
That's an easy one to help us get our sense around the North Star because there's a
Yes.
star rating in the hotel industry, but there isn't a star rating in retail or in the IT sector
Right.
or in the mobile industry. So therefore, you need to have other ways of expressing your North Star, and that's
Mhm.
where vision, mission, purpose come into play.
Yes.
I
Okay.
believe in them. They have an important role to play. But there's a
Mhm.
lot of confusion over what's a vision, what's a mission, and what's a purpose.
Mhm.
And I bring great clarity to that actually in some of the writing that I do because this is where companies get it wrong. They mix up vision with mission and again with this new concept of purpose.
Right.
When a North Star is clearly defined and communicated, not just put on a wall, but communicated, then next step is culture. Culture is, like I
Right.
described earlier, culture is the software of the business. And that
Mhm.
is part of the foundation of that and the North Star. It kind of weaves its way with the golden thread throughout every company. Once they're in place, Joshua, they don't change every few years. They
Right.
become the solid bedrock of the company for several years to come. You don't change
Mhm.
culture and North Star as often as you change strategy, which is step number three.
Wow.
Step number three
Okay.
is strategy. Now, why do I put strategy after culture? Because the world outside is changing at a frenetic pace. The
Yes.
days of having a 3, 5 year strategy are long gone.
Mhm.
While I do believe in looking out 3 to 5 years in shaping your strategy, you have
Mhm.
to update it every year. When you go through a full cycle of the different peaks and troughs in a year, that's 12 months. Every
Right.
company needs to revisit its strategy every year. It mightn't change a lot, but it will
Mhm.
definitely change some things. And too many
Right.
companies mistake strategy for the budget process. The budget process is only a set of numbers that
Right.
anticipate the score of the eventual game. But how you're going to
Mhm.
play that game is the strategy. So that's step number three.
Yes.
Step number four is people. So now you
Mhm.
know who you want to be when you grow up, your North Star. Now you know what culture you want. Now you know what strategy. In other words,
Mhm.
the who, the what, and when of your business.
Mhm.
But now you've got to think about people. So what's the right org structure that will help you to deliver on your strategy? What
Right.
kind of
Right.
leadership qualities are you looking for? And
Yes.
also, how are you going to make sure your people are engaged and productive? Because
Of
after all, we
course.
know that so many companies put a lot of thinking into how to change their customers' behavior,
Mm-hmm.
but they forget about the importance of changing their people's behavior
First,
if they're
of
going through a
course.
change program.
First, yes.
Step five is customer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me
Right.
distinguish between the customer we've considered in strategy, that's who they are, and that's also what their needs and changing needs are. But now at step
Mm-hmm.
five is about how we connect with that customer. I mean,
Wow.
social media is an obvious channel we use, but it's much, much more than that. What kind of customer
Mm-hmm.
experience we want them to have? Step
Mm-hmm.
number six is our proposition. So what is
Mm-hmm.
our proposition? What are we selling? How are we going to sell
Mm-hmm.
them? Where are we selling them? To what standard?
Mm-hmm.
And I use a three-legged stool analogy to help companies define their
Yes.
proposition. Three-legged
Yes.
stool is product, people, and place. So
Mm-hmm.
in there, we help them to define specifically what is your proposition. So if you're a retailer and you're selling saucepans, well, how can we help you with your proposition selling saucepans so it's different to the guy down the street who is also selling saucepans? And
Yes.
it's that
Yes.
different, looking for the differentiation and the USPs and so on.
Yes.
Finally, step
Yes.
seven.
Step
Step
seven.
seven is execution. And that's where you think
Right.
actually organizations spend 99.9% of the time executing. In other words,
Yes.
doing the job, getting things done, the day job.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where they fall down, Joshua. Far too
Exactly.
often, missed KPIs, conflict, tension,
Mm-hmm.
bad feeling, or customer complaints. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because the steps before that weren't addressed adequately.
At all.
So when you get all those steps pulled together, and in
Mm-hmm.
fact, I have many clients that have actually quite successfully pulled those seven steps together. The
Yes.
execution then just happens in a rhythm. It happens in a
Yes.
rhythm of success that they see growth each year. That's the
Wow.
seven steps in summary. And in there, you've got culture, which is, we already mentioned,
Mm.
but change is also part of that because the world is changing all the time. And
Absolutely.
organizations need to keep recognizing that delivering, while the seven steps haven't
Mm-hmm.
changed, the framework, the detail in each one is constantly changing.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Like, wow. I love, first of all, I love that the last step is execution because so much so that the culture, when it comes to corporations, to companies, you just go, 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 just do it, right? Just get it done, just
So,
finish it. We focus way too much on the aspect of getting things done and executing things where we forget like there's six steps that we need to accomplish first. These six steps are what will guide this execution to be more effective, more meaningful, not just for the customers, but for the people inside, which I feel like is really the center. It brings together all this change that you are, bringing to the forefront. What you're teaching us today is that I love it. I love how you are sharing this insight to us today. Alan, you mentioned earlier one of your books, The Culture. Four must have values. Culture matters. Four must have values. It was published along with your other book. You are also a two-time published author with Premium is the New Black and Culture Matters. But you have a new book coming out, so you're about to be a three-time published author. Um, Alan, I'd like you to talk us through a little bit maybe about your past book, but this new book that is coming out is called Show Me the Lid on the Box. Now, this is a peculiar title, right? Show Me the Lid on the
sure.
Box. And I'm very curious how this title applies to organizational change. What is this new book about, Alan?
So change is, when I set up my company 30 years ago, I called it Cara Change Management. And people thought I was
Mhm.
bonkers. Like, what's that all about? Because the concept of change management wasn't prevalent as much as it is now. But
Mhm.
because the pace, the volume, the complexity of change has accelerated so much in recent years, change management is now a much more talked about concept. And
Right.
when you look at change management, there are few organizations have the genuine skill for leading change programs. They
Right.
they initiate a new IT system or a merger or an acquisition or a restructuring, and then they
Mhm.
expect people just to fall into place and embrace the change.
Mhm.
And it doesn't work that way because too many companies just put all the energy into the process of
Right.
change, maybe even data and so on, but they forget about the human dimension, that this is
Right.
not easy for people. And, you know, many people do resist change, not because they're a
Yeah.
pain in the ass person, but actually there are some genuine reasons for why
Yes.
some people resist change.
Mm-hmm.
One reason is to do with past experiences. So, if, for
Yes.
example, I have seen in a previous employment that when the consultants came in and made changes, people lost their jobs. Well,
Right.
that can raise anxiety levels straight away based on past experience. Or if, for
Mm-hmm.
example, I got hurt
Mm-hmm.
myself in a previous change, I will have
Mm-hmm.
my defenses up and I will tend to resist. I don't want to get hurt again, kind of thinking.
Right.
So there's genuine experience reasons for why some people resist change, but then on the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, there's also genetic reasons for some people resisting
Right.
change.
Okay.
For example, in the brain's amygdala, when that controls emotions. So when we see threats or significant changes that might change the status quo for us, the amygdala can cause an emotional response of
Okay.
fear or
Mm-hmm.
or stress or resistance ultimately. Or
Mm-hmm.
also, some people are in their DNA, in their brain, in their wiring, going back thousands of years. We have this fight or flight syndrome inert
Yes.
in us. That
Mm-hmm.
when we see a threat, we will either fight or flight or flee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
and then some people are risk averse. Some people are just genuinely risk averse. I know some people who
Yes.
would just much rather stay within a comfort zone, and you'll hear
Mm-hmm.
words like, "Oh, we've always done it this way."
Mm-hmm.
Or some people are actually love novelty. They love new things. You know, you can see
Mm-hmm.
some people with the new iPhone. A friend of mine needs to get a new iPhone or a new phone,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a total Apple fan. But he won't buy a new phone until September. Why? Because that's when they'll be releasing the new model. I
Of
mean, he's that
course.
excited by the newness.
Wow.
But there's also some people who have just a natural disposition
Yes.
to anxiety. That when they see
Yes.
change, but here's the thing, there are ways to both help people overcome that resistance. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
leader, we have a duty as leaders to help our
Yes.
people to acknowledge it first of all
Mm-hmm.
and understand it and then help them. And that's
Mm-hmm.
communication is a huge part of that. And here's the
Yes.
lid in the box story.
Yes.
And here's what I see missing all of the time. Joshua, I
Mm-hmm.
want you to imagine if I gave you a jigsaw puzzle, took a
Yep.
500-piece jigsaw puzzle, and
Mm-hmm.
I came to you and I dumped all the pieces on the table, but
Mm-hmm.
I hid the lid in the box for you, how would you feel? You'd be pretty frustrated,
Yes. Absolutely.
and it would take you way, way too long. With a scowl on your face, it would take you far too long to assemble
Mm-hmm.
the jigsaw.
Mm-hmm.
If I showed you the lid in the box, well,
Mm-hmm.
then you'd be much more willing and able to embrace it. Now, here's what's happening in
Right.
organizational life.
Mm-hmm.
When people are hired, they're typically given a bunch of pieces of an overall jigsaw, and they're
Right.
expected to come into work every day and plug their pieces into the big master jigsaw. That is the business model. So they come to
Right.
work every day, plugging them in, plugging them in. But then over
Mm-hmm.
time, the lid on the jigsaw changes. And the
Right.
leaders change the lid. Why? Because the world
Mm-hmm.
outside is changing and they have to adapt and change the lid on the box. But too many companies miss the communication gap. They miss the essential need to communicate the new lid on the box to their people. So
Right.
there's a two prong approach here. One part is to do with the leaders having a responsibility to recognize that people need to be brought on a journey. We need to
Mm-hmm.
understand how people potentially might resist change and why, understand that
Mm-hmm.
and help them through it by giving them
Mm-hmm.
great visibility of the lid in the box.
Of course.
Simon Sinek calls it the why. Cotter refers to it as the burning platform. My way of describing the same thing is show me the lid on the box. And then,
Yes.
but there's one responsibility which comes from the leaders to effectively bring people on this journey, starting with show me the lid. But there's another responsibility on the individuals themselves to
Mm-hmm.
not get stuck in a rut and just dig in their heels and say, well, I'm not changing. Because there's an
Mhm.
arrogance in that, actually, when you think about it. When you think
Mhm.
about Joshua, if I'm a person that resists change, I need to
Mhm.
kind of, I need to just shake myself because after all, my life today is as a result of countless changes that happened before. And I've
Yes.
landed at a place here today as a result of lots of change. Wouldn't it be
Mhm.
quite arrogant of me now to think that change should now stop just because I've landed here?
Yes.
That's not
Mhm.
okay. That's not appropriate. That's not good thinking. So I need to
Yes.
now, and in my book, I go through some tips on how leaders can lead change, but also for the individual, how they ought to embrace change, and some tips
Mhm.
for them to how to
Mhm.
help them actually understand and embrace the new change.
Wow. Alan, I'd like to first of all thank you into bringing the importance of leaders helping their people overcome this anxiety for change. Because, like I said, like you said, rather, is that people are afraid of change because change is painful. It gives us anxiety. It forces us to face things that we'd rather not face, right? And so much so that why would organizational leaders even start focusing on that? There's no point because people are afraid of change. But uh, apart from just the changing landscape of individual organizations, there is also a changing landscape overall when it comes to the workplace, so to speak, and how organizations interact with their people, in the sense that, we need to be putting their well-being, you know, first as well. And I just love that. And I think this is the same, this would resonate with our audience and listeners as well, in the sense that there is a changing landscape or a changing culture across that, people need to change individually so they can also change organizationally. And I love that. I love your show me the lid on the box. I love that title. I love the analogy that you've explained just now. You really got me going on here, Alan. But as much as I want to keep you around longer, um, I have to end this soon. But first, I always like to end it with this question in this context. And what is the future of organizational change? What are the future aspirations of Alan O'Neill? Looking ahead, what emerging trends you see? Like I said, that I feel like this is a changing landscape where organizations are starting to see that they need to take care of their people. Anything that you would like to, influence in organizational change and strategies, and what are you seeing companies preparing to adapt, and how do you see Cara being part of this change?
Sure, sure. Okay. So the pandemic taught the world a lot about humanity, about
Mhm.
sensitivity, about
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, about
Yes.
the need for taking care of each other. So what I'm
Yes.
seeing everywhere I go now is a greater sense of in wanting our people to be engaged, our workforce to be engaged. Now,
Yes.
there is a win for a company in that in terms of productivity because
Mm-hmm.
you get better productivity when people are engaged. But also, there's another win, which is it stops turnover. In other words, it people are more likely to stay in an organization. But it's not just for those financial measures that we're looking at engagement. It's also
Mm-hmm.
trying to recognize that we as organizations have a purpose in life beyond just profit. We also
Yes.
have to think about
Yes.
the planet. We got to think about people. And I'm seeing that more and more. Now, engagement engagement, we help companies with engagement through surveys and then programs to help corrective actions as a result of the survey. But the
Mm-hmm.
really mature organizations recognize that if they want to go deeper into
Yes.
that, they got to think culture and
Yes.
recognize that a few years ago, when they simply Googled a few words and nobody can now even repeat them, they need to
Mm-hmm.
stop, throw that out, and refresh their culture. Because this, to me, in a proven way, is what really, really helps an organization to transform and
Yeah.
deliver on its ultimate goals. And the final thing I'll say, and this
Yes.
is like a trinity engagement and culture. but
Mhm.
you also have to recognize the changing role of leadership. We've been doing leadership programs for 30 years, but I've
Mhm.
thrown away, literally dumped all of the old programs and thinking we had on leadership, which was
Mhm.
using a traditional set of competencies. We've
Mhm.
completely revised them and developed what we call the leader's six pack. I don't want to personally have a six pack, but everyone would love to have a six pack. And
Mhm.
leaders need to have a six pack to be effective, strong leaders. Because don't forget, the definition of a great leader is one who generates sufficient and willing followership. That's what
Yes, that
leaders
is true.
do. That's the measure of a great leader. And if you
Mhm.
don't get those three coming together, engagement, culture, and leadership, you are missing a trick. And you will not reach the ultimate point in my model, the seven steps to profit. You won't get
Mhm.
the profitability that you deserve. And you probably don't deserve to get that profitability
Mhm.
unless you focus on those three.
That's fantastic. Alan, is this the secret of why you are 37 years young still and doing all this work in organizational change?
I wish, and and actually, genuinely, I do wish I was so much younger. Because I'm not intending on going anywhere soon. But there's so much potential. There's so much fun to be had in
Mhm.
following these ideas. Not just my
That's
ideas.
true.
I'm not the only one with these ideas. But there's so
Mhm.
much fun to be had
That's true.
with AI coming fast and furiously at
Yes.
us. I just
Yes.
wish I had another 50 years to enjoy it because it's going to be great.
Alan, who knows? We'd probably have you for the next 50, 80 years with how medicine technology is going. We would definitely love to have you much longer on this show as well. But at the same time, also, Alan, I'm sure that the audiences and listeners, and I for myself, share the enthusiasm that you have, that there is. I feel it. I feel the enthusiasm of that there's so much that can happen. There's so much change that can happen, especially imagining your experience of how you've seen organizations operate before to how much they've changed now, then of course the future looks bright. Of course, there's a lot to look ahead. Alan, thank you so much for your insights. And I'd like to give you this opportunity for the audiences to know, let us know where we can find you, where can we connect with you, and where can we expect this new book coming out.
Well, in reverse, the book is now available on Amazon
All right.
worldwide, and it's available in Kindle and it's available in print copy. It's a
Mhm.
deliberately a short book. My first two books were 50,000 words. This one is under 15,000. You would read it
Mhm.
in an hour and a half. And I've
Mhm.
deliberately written that book to make it short and fast and easy to read. In fact, I'm developing a suite of books in this same series. I call them KISS Insights,
Wow.
KISS, keeping it
Yes.
short and simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So watch for more books in this year, actually, in that series.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is currently Show Me the Lid on the Box,
Mm-hmm.
and how to manage change with least resistance. That's now available on Amazon.com.
Yes.
And then where you find me, well, probably the easiest place is my personal website, which is alanoneil.biz. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the ALAN is Alan. O'Neill
Mm-hmm.
is the Irish spelling
Yes.
ONEILL dot
Mm-hmm.
biz. AlanO'Neill.biz. And
Alan,
it'd be a pleasure
thank you.
to meet any of your listeners. Yeah.
Are you on any socials? Perhaps maybe our listeners would like to
LinkedIn.
find you there. All right.
LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
LinkedIn is the only one I believe in. The only one I
Okay,
bother with. Yeah.
fantastic. Alan, as again, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm that there is, an optimistic future to look forward to when it comes to organizational change. And not just that, I feel like you've shared deeper, individual potential for change in everyone where that we can all dig deep into, and you've shared all that wisdom, you've shared all that insight, and um thank you so much for your time today, Alan, and I speak for the audiences as well. I am certain that we'd love to have you again next time. But today, Alan, thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure, and thank you too, Joshua. It's a pleasure to meet you. And good luck with your program.
Fantastic. And for everyone, make sure to check out Alan. Make sure to go buy his book, his really short book, and check out his other books as well. Connect with him, go to his website, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.